Welcome back to another episode of Detections Podcast with your hosts, XL Detrades and
Understudy 77.
So first I want to let you.
Yeah, I'm not feeling that one though.
You got to try it again. Try it again. Hold on. All right. So welcome back to another episode of Detections Podcast with your hosts, XL Detrades and
Understudy 77.
Woohoo! All right.
I'm gonna find one eventually that works. Like it's gonna happen, and it's probably gonna take us like the entire length of the show. It'll be like the last. It'll be the last episode we ever record. I'll be like, that's the one. I'm using that one from now on, and then we'll never record another episode.
So real quick, I want to start off with. Hold on. Hear this? That is not Portland burning down and in a war zone. So I just want to let it know everything is pretty normal here.
Is that actually true, though? Like, I feel like that's not true.
Well, we do have one specific location where that's not entirely true, but
if we didn't have video this time like usual, I would think you got picked up and put in an unmarked van.
Well, I do have a story that I can share about that almost happening, so.
Oh, well, that's actually one probably worth getting into maybe a little bit later.
Yeah.
But
so,
we don't want to keep everybody waiting. So we have a guest tonight.
I'm super excited because I haven't talked to our guest since October last year.
It has been a while. So I am very, very excited to announce our guest tonight, Mr. Ray Redacted.
Well, now I definitely want to hear the story about almost getting thrown into the minivan. I mean, do we really have to wait for that? I mean, that's a pretty big teaser.
Well, we don't now. We just needed to get you here first before we started that story.
Well, it is really good to be here, guys. I am in the category of longtime listener. Sometimes I do listen to you as I fall asleep. So I don't. There's certain things that enter my subliminal brain. I will just tell you now. But
it's those dulcet tones, right?
Sure,
they help.
Sure. But it is good. It is definitely good to be on Detections, and I'm been looking forward to this for a while. So
we're happy to have you here.
So tell me a little bit about the Portland minivan, please.
That's where we're going. Let's do it.
So it was an SUV. It was like a Chevy SUV that was a rental, but it was one time I was out taking pictures, actually offering like street medic aid at the protests. And just for the people listening, I've gone to the Portland protests. This week has been 3 times already this week, but up until then, it's only been once or twice a week. And then watching the local independent journalists to kind of keep an idea about what's going on so that I can have like actual firsthand experience that I can say, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I saw, compared to what the news on any political side is saying. It's like, here's at least an experience that you can put in relation to everything else. So one of the nights I was coming back last week, there was a number of times where I had flashlights shown directly at me, taking pictures. I've had CS canisters like shot right next at my feet or underneath a car behind me when I've been out with my camera taking pictures of the front line and seeing what's going on, or getting seen offering aid to people who have been affected by gas, like pouring water in their eyes and things like that. And then I started walking back to my car by myself. And just as soon as I started getting out of the range of the main group, this SUV started following me along my entire path, all the way back to my car. And it wasn't until that I got to a more busy street where there were some other businesses that had cameras on it that they then turned off and went back towards where the protest was going.
Jeez.
And now, these are not people that are wearing identification, or there's nothing on the car.
All the windows were tinted, so I could only see like vague shapes of bodies inside.
This is the one thing I have to say. The happenings in Portland are awful. But I do have to say, like, as protests have died down across the rest of the country, like, I am glad that Portland is keeping the movement alive. Like, I really, really am, because like somebody has to. Right, and I'm glad that they're still shining a light there.
Now, are the protests really shutting down, or is the media moved on to other distractions?
I know DC has mostly quelled for the most part. From what I've seen.
Detroit has not, though. Detroit
Right.
has been going very strong this entire time too.
So now, Exile, you remind me actually of Dash because he also goes out and provides first aid and bottles of water and just material assistance to people that are needing assistance. I think he actually even will assist law enforcement. If somebody needs something, he'll just help whoever, right?
That would be me too. Like if I saw a law enforcement officer, even if I like have a disagreement with their way, if I see a law enforcement officer injured or separated or in harm's way, because I value all human life, whether I agree or disagree with your professional choices or political decisions.
But at the end of the day, I mean, ultimately, we are being pitted against each other, right? The narrative is it's one group versus another, which is, I think back to the very beginning, kind of not the very beginning, but the beginning for me anyway, of hacker culture, which is like reading 2600 and Frack in the 80s and 90s. And there was a little bit of revolutionary talk, right? The Anarchist Cookbook was there, and you had a lot of folks that were writing about, overthrowing and really kind of taking control of the system, so to speak, or whatever. So it's a little bit surreal that there is actually some of this going on.
Yep.
But the unmarked federal troops, the unnamed unmarked federal troops that are not necessarily so trained in how to handle this, that I would have never predicted on my bingo card in a million years.
So there's a bit of I've noticed that there's a bit of a exchange on unmarked versus unidentified wording. So in the videos that people have seen, I didn't catch any like of the patches because they do have their unit patches, but when they're on the lines, the unit patches are there. They're just hard to see, but they never identify themselves. When someone's like recording or even a legal observer is asking, saying, who are you with? What organization are you a part of? They never answer the question. So
now in fairness, the police say that that's because of doxing. They say that because of doxing is such a horrible situation out there that if they put their names on their outfits, then people will, dox them basically and cause trouble for them or whatever else. But there is a solution to that, by the way. You put a number on there.
Yeah.
you number them.
So New York had that problem where all the badges are supposed to have numbers, and they were putting black tape over the numbers so that their badge numbers were unidentifiable.
Yeah, well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose.
Right?
And they were doing that, and they were doing that here too. And for a while, they did tape over and then would write these numbers, like the number 12. So if you see like fuck 12, that's because for a while, Portland Police Bureau had the number 12 written on the badge across multiple officers.
Okay,
Gotcha.
Are you scared? Do you have that fight or flight response at all, or is it just purely?
My response is when I hear the flashbangs and gas going off to move towards them to look for people who are injured or need assistance getting out. I'm a crazy dude. Like I see tons of people running away, and I'm like, who can I go help? Who needs help to get out of a dangerous situation?
Yeah, so I'm exactly the opposite. I've been exposed to CS gas twice in my life, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't ever want to be exposed a third time again because I am a total wimp.
It totally fucking sucks. But I do have a gas mask. I have ballistic goggles that I wear too, and I just ordered a Mira mask that's like a military grade issue mask, so that when I'm out there, I have a full face mask cover and everything at this point.
I'll tell you this, Ray. In the entirety of my life, I don't know that I've ever met a bigger empath than Exiled, though.
Okay, well that's good. That is good to know. That's good to know. And so you're going out there tonight or this weekend?
No, I did 3 nights this week, so that's going to be it. And I also am very intentional about making sure that I maintain my physical rest and mental health through it all, because it is. There's going to be a lot of people in the area who are going to have PTSD for a very long time because they're not used to the flashbang sounds, which are louder than gunshots. Mm-hmm. And they do stuff like 10 to 12 flashbangs going off at the same time to simulate like auto rapid fire happening. Mm-hmm. Or when you see like 2 square blocks that end up with rolling clouds of CS gas that if you're in it, you can't see 3 feet in front of where you're standing. Like, there are people who are not used to this kind of stuff or haven't like had enough childhood trauma to have the mental survival to be able to separate out in the moment.
I have to assume that there's way more people not used to that than used to that, because like that would terrify the crap out of me.
Yeah. Most people are, and with the recent change, so since the Wall of Moms, Wall of Dads has been getting news, the groups have changed in this week. So I was talking with a friend last night who's been kind of doing the same thing, and my street medic buddy, where we're noticing a change in the people coming out. And it's a lot of people who are coming out now haven't come out before. So we're seeing a new wave of people getting their first exposure to all of this.
Wow. Well, there was a huge change in the country, and I know that a few episodes back, you guys made the very deliberate decision to come out and say Black Lives Matter, and that it's a time to listen and a time to show empathy. And I commend you for that. But there was a huge change in the attitudes towards Black Lives Matter in the last 12 months. It went from being supported by about a third to being supported by about 2/3. Yeah. And, when social scientists look at things that people suddenly change their opinion on, right? The ones that they always talk about are marriage equality and marijuana legalization, because those two also changed very quickly, but they changed over a period of 4 or 5 years, not a period of over 12 months, right? Yeah. So it definitely was a sudden social change. And then I think for people like myself who actually are of privilege and are just now becoming aware of how, of what that impact of that privilege is, right? We're paying a lot more attention to things that we didn't think maybe were necessarily that big of a deal before, right? Like microaggressions.
It's an interestingly eye-opening experience, and I'll share this. It's a very interestingly eye-opening experience when a person of privilege, me as a white guy, first understands what white male privilege is. Like, in a weird way, it basically changed my core belief in the world and in a lot of the things that I stood up for when it dawned on me. And like, I had to have that light bulb moment, right? Mm-hmm. But when it eventually dawned on me, it drastically changed me as like a human being.
Sure.
Which is a really interesting thing to go through. And it's something that like I encourage anybody to go through, like really challenge your own convictions. The only other time that I can think of that challenged my convictions maybe more was when I had a daughter. Like that drastically changed my perception of the world.
Now, understudy, have you ever been in a situation where you were being pulled over and you thought that you were going to die? Like you thought there was a chance?
I have not. That's the thing.
So that's the biggest one, right? That's the most obvious example in the entire world. But I can't even imagine the terror of an unmarked car, which you don't really know if that's police officers or not. I mean, it could just really literally be a bunch of random dudes that have an axe to grind, right? I mean, it could be.
Yep. Well, that was the daughter realization. Like, oh, if my daughter likes tech and gaming and all these things, like, is she going to face constant discrimination because she's a woman?
For sure.
And like I extended into the same thought when I had the Black Lives Matter realization and the importance of it, because it's such like a life shattering kind of way of changing how you think about the world to realize what other people go through. And like, all right, I get it now. Like I get that I have this, basically I get that I have no inherent bias. Like people don't have inherent bias against me. Mm-hmm. I understand this now. Also, I do have to call out that I very much noticed, like, you were so used to being on the other side of the microphone because you're interviewing us right now.
Yeah, he just flipped it back. He totally flipped it back on you.
Oh, well, I'm fascinated by this. I mean, I'm just really interested in that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So great segue. I just recently launched a podcast. Just very recently.
Hold on. Before we get to that, though, we have to do one very important thing.
Okay.
And that's you have to tell the people who are listening who you are.
Oh, okay. Yes, I am Ray Redacted. My last name, I was not born with that name, Redacted. My parents actually called me Ray Unknown, but I thought Redacted sounded cooler. So I go by that nickname. I'm Ray Redacted on Twitter. And I am a technologist and an InfoSec researcher that works for a global company. And I'm also a mental health care advocate in our industry, as well as a relatively outspoken advocate of a lot of social justice issues like diversity and inclusion and gate smashing. Gate smashing being making the industry more friendly to newbies. And my background was I spent some time in my youth as a hacker and phreaker and cracker of video games and doing all kinds of shenanigans with BBSs, etc. And eventually kind of grew up and grew out of that and started internet service providers. And then I've been working in telecommunications and MSSP services ever since.
There we go. Because we hit on so many of the topics that we're going to expand on more later. But it's really good for people if they don't know who you are.
Yeah, so I'm in this. I'm in this book. There's this book called "Tribe of Hackers Security Leaders." It's a green book. It's a green book of. There's a red team book. There's a blue team book coming, and then there's an original book as well. But I'm in the security leaders book, and reading through this book, they basically ask all these people all these questions, the same questions to all these people. I said I would like to ask some of these people the same questions. And so I approached the author, Marcus Carey, the week after the pandemic, back when everyone thought we had free time on our hands. Remember those days? Everyone thought, "Oh, I'm gonna have free time. I can start a hobby. I think I'll start a new hobby." So I launched that podcast, and so we've recorded about 16 episodes since then in the 4 months or so that's been going on there. So that is the Tribe of Hackers podcast, or TOH podcast. And I am just going to shill it on this show because,
by all means,
because we're fledgling and we're new, we're brand new, and I'm starting to figure out a lot of the things. But one of the funniest things about that is that I originally was planning on just asking people the questions were in the book, but nobody remembers what they answered, so it makes people too nervous, including me. Like, if you were to whip that book out right now and ask me those questions, I'd be like, "Oh God, I don't remember what I answered that one," because your opinion changes over time. And, somebody just brought up the topic of PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. I think certainly people that were protesting for the first time being exposed to flashbangs or serial flashbangs are going to have PTSD. But one of the big things, detection, if you will, that I would like your listeners to consider is that none of us are going to escape the year 2020 without some PTSD, right? Yeah. Because the amount of loss has been so monumental, and the emotions and the emotional roller coasters and the change in lifestyles, everything has been so dramatic, and it may or may not be permanent, that the chances are pretty high that there's going to be a booming business for treating of PTSD.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is the year that keeps on giving. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we've got tsunami, swarm of bees, and potential dinosaurs is what I've seen coming down for this month alone.
Yeah,
and dinosaurs would be interesting.
It's really interesting because when I was a kid, when I was younger, we would go to New Orleans, and the cab driver in New Orleans would always tell you, one of these days there's going to be a flood, and all of this is going to be underwater. Right? This is before there was actually a flood, and all this was underwater. And then you go to Northern California, and the locals always say, "One of these days, the great one is coming, and it's gonna whatever."
We're gonna sink into the sea.
But I remember thinking the same about global health issues as well. Like, many, many times. Like, as a matter of fact, I remember thinking it during like H1N1 or during these other types, because it felt to me like we weren't really prepared for it. And I wish I'd been wrong about that. Like, I really wish we had been. But there are major InfoSec analogies to it, right? You can't ever prepare for the absolute unthinkable, but you can have an incident response plan. Right?
You could do a little threat modeling on top of it too.
And we know that communication is very key. Consistent communication is extremely key, because we have a massive case study of what happens when people are given inconsistent information about things like masks and stuff. So, this will be something that people study for many, many years. And
there will be a lot of other really interesting parts to it too. Like, not just the health and the death, but like the mental health side of it will be really interesting, because, we see these huge booms in Zoom and like video technology and Slack and text technology. But one of the things that's really interesting, and I read a study a couple of weeks ago about Zoom meetings are actually significantly more taxing than in-person meetings.
For sure. It's Zoom syndrome. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Zoom is not happy about them being called Zoom syndrome. They want it to be called video conference fatigue syndrome, but it is called Zoom syndrome. Yes, that was the first time it was coined. And do you remember why? Do you remember what the reason was?
So refresh my memory, because
it has a lot to do with your camera being on.
Oh yeah.
100%. So if your camera's not on, you really don't necessarily have that, but feeling like people can pick up on your nonverbal cues, and that you have to be attentive and paying attention is particularly exhausting. Whereas in conference calls, you really didn't, like old school conference calls, right? You really didn't have to do that.
Well, and in an in-person meeting, if somebody's looking at you on a Zoom call, you don't. Like you have no idea if those 30 people are paying attention to you or not.
For sure. So, but that particular part, the mental health aspect, that is what some people call the fourth wave, right? The fourth wave is the potential for suicides, divorces, substance abuse, self-harm, all of those things that are coming that will be the effects. But we really haven't seen them yet, right? Despite anybody saying that there's been a massive rise in suicides or anything like that, the data is not quite there yet. But we do know that it eventually will be coming because people are using coping mechanisms now that will not be permanent coping mechanisms or that won't hold up over time, right? Yeah. For example. So our particular industry was making some progress on the mental health aspect, okay? And that a lot of that has to do with some really brave people like Danny Akaki and Amanda Berlin and Jason Street who really made an issue out of coming forward and talking about their own experience and dealing with mental wellness issues, right? And we were really starting to make a lot of progress with like mental health hackers and with InfoSanity and a lot of organizations that were removing some of the stigma around that. And then COVID came along.
And you're basically at that point, like it or not, cutting off a support system.
Well, sure, for sure. Well, that's one aspect, right? I mean, and certainly I do miss going to conferences and seeing Exile at the bar, which I think I saw him twice in 9 days, by the way. But that's a whole different story. But there is that part, right? But we're also not seeing our families. We're not attending funerals. Yep. We're giving ourselves the leeway to engage in things that maybe we weren't engaging in, as much before. Like, for example, I'm giving my kids pretty much unlimited screen time because I'm cutting them a lot of slack with regards to that and chores and things like that. But the worst part of all, the part that's the most mentally draining period, is not knowing when it will end. Like if I told you definitively, this will be over on February 11th, 2021. Your first reaction would be, holy shit, that sucks. Oh my God, February. But your second reaction would be, okay, well, at least we have a date, right?
You can plan for it. You can plan for it. You can make,
Yeah, for sure, right? And it could be 16 months. It could be 22. It could be, there's really no necessarily kind of concept to that. And that is really the difference between a hurricane, for example, post-hurricane, or other types of natural disasters. So I do worry. I worry about that. I worry about the community. I worry about people engaging in self-harm. And I hope that we are reaching out to each other, checking in on each other enough and often enough, including our loved ones and our relatives and including our workers, right? Yep. Just checking in on their mental health and mental wellness, because I will tell you, I know some people that are really, really solid, supportive, empathic people, and they're having some really bad days. Like occasionally they're just having absolutely, I'm shut down, I can't move days. So
I know our listeners can't see it, but I'm raising my hand. Like,
you gave away the secret that we're on a video conference. I wanted to be able to see you guys.
No, I was just gonna say, selfishly, that's part of the reason. It's definitely part of the reason why I've gone out to the protests too. Like, take my mask and go out there because I'm very much an extroverted person, and not having that in-person interaction is super fucking draining for me.
Sure.
And at least in that situation, it's supporting something that needs to happen on a societal change, but it also selfishly gives me that in-person social interaction the entire time.
Sure, for sure. And it always has been that way, right? When you help others, you're also helping yourself. I actually had Philip Wiley. I don't know if you guys know Philip Wiley, but wow, he's an amazing guy. I had him on the Tribe of Hackers podcast, which I just mentioned the entire brand name right there. I had him on last week, and I got messages, including a message from a psychologist who said that studies do show that it does benefit you, when you are assisting others, as long as it's healthy assistance, right?
Oh, yeah.
like if you're helping out an alcoholic by delivering liquor, that's probably not going to help either one of you, right, so to speak. But as long as it's healthy assistance, it does benefit. It does benefit you. Now, we had in the InfoSec community in 2016 and 2017, we'd had a rash of high-profile suicides that had happened. It felt like a whole bunch of them had happened in a short period of time. Okay. Now, I say it felt like that because scientifically speaking, your brain starts to notice things and suddenly, people think things happen in threes and all this kind of things, right? So I don't necessarily know that it's scientific, but I remember several of those happening in a row. And around about that time was when Amanda Berlin gave a keynote at a B-Sides in Nashville or Knoxville, where she talked about her own mental health struggles. And that's when the Mental Health Hackers was kind of founded. That was the actual beginning of that. And I learned about it at the Diana Initiative because she was the keynote speaker at Diana Initiative. And it's basically like, how there's a chill out room at DEF CON? Like there's basically like a chill out room. It's like that, except it's mental health wellness kind of chill out room, right? So
I also remember how upset I was last year when they closed the chill out room and put a band in it instead.
Well, sure. So, but this is that, but you also can have massages, and stress balls, and coloring books, and talks, and all these other types of it's not necessarily like a group therapy session, although there's some of that as well. But because we certainly don't try to be professionals or whatever. But so a lot of that's moved virtual, and we're actually doing that at Black Hat as well. The Mental Health Hackers Village is going to be happening at Black Hat upcoming, and there's going to be talks about burnout. And I think Amanda's going to give her original talk for the folks that haven't seen that before.
And I hear the first 50 people will be shipped a massage chair.
Yeah, well, that would actually be wonderful. By the way, that would be wonderful. It's going to have to be like a full PPE masseuse, though, because
I should clarify that I just made that up. That is not a fact.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So that's coming up. And so this is the other thing I wanted to kind of bring to the podcast today is for most hackers, this is a very special month, right? Over time, DEF CON has become DEF CON Black Hat, then it's become this entire week, and then it basically became Hacker Summer Camp, and then you had QueerCon and Diana Initiative and lots of parties. And basically what used to be 2 or 3 days is now stretched into, I think in some cases like 10 days, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you also look forward to it all year, right? And you kind of recover afterwards. So we're not having that. We're not going to be going through that this year, right? And as we shouldn't be because of safe mode and everything else. But we do need to be watching out for each other, especially people that may have a little bit of, post-con depression, which, by the way, I will tell you, I usually have post-con depression anyway. It usually takes me 3 days to get over it anyway, but that's a different story completely.
I totally get it. Cause like you miss everybody. Like these are people for the most part that only see each other maybe once a year, maybe a couple times a year. And you don't get to hang out that often. You don't get to interact. And this year, like suddenly that's been ripped away.
Yeah.
And that's hard. Like that's a legitimately hard thing. And that's a thing that you are allowed to be upset about. And like, if I could say anything about mental health, like you are allowed to feel your feelings.
Sure.
Like that's important to talk about. Like if this is really hard for you, like it is allowed to be. And you are allowed to talk to people about it. And you are allowed to engage with others about that difficulty.
Yeah, so I mean, and I think the thing that's really unique about this year that's particularly impactful is that at most times in your life, you might have family stress, or you might have career stress, or you might have financial stress, or you might be concerned about the macro economy, or you might be worried about social justice or socio-political issues. And you may be scared for your health or the health of your family. But not all at once, right?
Yep.
Not all of them combined. And then on top of that, if for some reason you were going through several of those things at once, normally your friends wouldn't be, right? Like somebody around you would be able to, be that helping hand. But we're in this situation now where every single person is under enormous, constant grinding, exhausting stress.
The lines of work and home are completely blurred.
Yeah.
People are stuck together. It's hard to be in the same room with the same people every day, all the time. That's natural, by the way.
And as evidence, we're trying to make jokes and humor as coping mechanisms, and the big joke is becoming the bingo card of the apocalypse, right? Like, what are we going to get this month? That's pretty freaking telling. Like, if our coping mechanism is, okay, what's next?
I mean, that's how I handle stress. I make jokes, and I get snarky.
Well, sure. And when it first happened, at the very, very beginning, all the jokes were about alcohol, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's no reason you can't drink at 9, or I'm gonna have to. When everybody was homeschooling, the joke was please don't tell the principal, but I think the teacher's drunk, meaning that you were the actual teacher or whatever, right? But I do think that it's getting a little long in the tooth, so to speak, to use the Texas expression. Yep. I think we're ready for this to be passed,
but there's no end in sight,
or at least to know that that's the case. But enough happy sunshine, whatever talk. We will get through it, right? We will help each other through it. Yeah. We won't come out unscathed, right? There's immense loss all around us everywhere, anyway. But in some cases, we will come out better as well, right? Because it turns out that empathy is a learned skill. So not everybody in the world knows how to do it, but a lot of people are learning, right? That's a big one. And when we were talking about kind of the changing perspectives around privilege, that's an example, that's an example of that, right?
Yeah, I am the poster boy of empathy not being a natural skill, by the way, though nobody that knows me today would know it. I learned empathy when I had a kid.
Oh, really?
That is when I learned empathy. I am not a naturally empathetic person. I have put in a lot of work to get to that point. It is 100% a learned skill.
Well, and I will tell you, I've come around on some thoughts myself. Like, for example, a year ago, I would have told you that it was perfectly okay that your health insurance be tied to your employment. But it turns out maybe that isn't quite a good idea. So
when like 60% of people are out of work,
yeah, for sure,
health insurance more than ever.
Yeah, for sure, right. And I think we have seen that in many cases, people having a safety net of basic health care can be beneficial, to a lot of other folks. Again, a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have scoffed at the idea of universal basic income, which I think Andrew Yang or somebody was talking about that back then. Yep. Nowadays, I'm all for it, but as long as it's within reason and everything else, because we have not really seen the massive waves of unemployment that we potentially might in our industry. We may not. I mean, I'm not necessarily being a self-fulfilling prophecy, but again, empathy is you can never have too much.
Oh yeah, and you pick it up as you go along, and it's important for anybody who listens to this to know, like, it's okay to change. It's actually healthy to change. And it's healthy to adjust your opinion and challenge your own convictions and talk to people who disagree with you, which is something we've kind of stopped doing as a country a long time ago. But it's really healthy to talk to people who disagree with you and maybe learn something new.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll tell you, like, I've had, just in the process of having this podcast, Hexadecimate, that's Emily Cross, was rather convincing that we need to be empathic towards the criminals. Leslie's always told me that, by the way. Leslie's always said the difference between somebody that is, breaking into something to feed their family and you is really one paycheck, right? But it really hit home when Emily kind of explained it, which is that we need to be empathic towards the real world red teamers, right? Yep. Because, especially in other parts of the world where the only opportunity they have may be, things like that. So that one's a little bit harder. That one's, especially for hardcore blue team guys. I bet you it's a pretty hardcore for you to take, to be empathic towards the Twitter data breacher guys or whatever, right? They tried to take over all those accounts for $100,000, I think it was.
To an extent, but understanding it is important, and that kind of goes both ways. And this actually brings us back to probably our most popular episode and the whole conversation about OSTs. the open source tool stuff, and like the damage versus the reward of that.
The
and like,
OffSec.
Yeah, the OffSec tool. Sorry, that's the appropriate wording for it. But like the division that exists in that frame of reference, and like I have, where I sit on it, but I don't want to just sit where I sit. Like I want to actually have a conversation together and figure out an answer that works for more people. But like the division is crazy. And in InfoSec, we've always had the red blue like division, and we joke about it. We joke about it constantly on here. One of our first guests was Blind Hacker. Yeah. And we just spent a whole bunch of time making fun of him for being a red teamer.
Yeah, and I still sometimes try to pull out the phrase "red actually is blue."
Yeah,
sure.
But we have also always tried to, talk about the importance of any side of this and the importance of the duality of it. Because here's the other fact that maybe I could have whatever feelings I want about the Twitter hackers, but if they didn't exist, I probably wouldn't have a paycheck.
Yeah,
and I do like having a paycheck. So like, there's got to be bad for good guys to have something to stop. Otherwise, okay, this is going to be a really bad joke, but I'm going to say it anyway. Otherwise, you just become like our police industry.
Wow. Okay, so that's an interesting pivot that's there. Well, I will tell you, not necessarily talking about the Twitter hack, but thinking about in March when the world suddenly flipped a switch and everyone stayed home. A massive number of people started using Zoom. School teachers, every company in the world, because you could have 40 minutes of free Zoom, right? It was just free. It was WebRTC, and I don't think you even had to have a plugin, and it just worked, right? Period. And in the process of that, they uncovered several vulnerabilities, including potential kind of pseudo RCE, including several different, because Zoom had never threat modeled for what would happen if our usage went up 6,000%, including teachers and medical personnel and everything else, right?
And suddenly had all this visibility from researchers on top of that.
And so, never had before. So the Twitter InfoSec, the Twinfosec, if you will, went crazy on bashing Zoom for their repeated transgressions regarding how to handle this, right?
Very clearly.
And in the middle of all of that smoke and explosions and poo-poo being flung and everything else, Dave Kennedy comes out, okay, Hacking Dave comes out from Binary Defense and DerbyCon and stuff, right? That day.
Yeah.
And he says, everybody calm down because I think they're handling this pretty well. And he actually made a pretty good argument for some of the heroic measures that they had been taking on. And I listened to him. And I thought he had a really good point. I thought, oh, wow, he's really got a very interesting point. And, we love to bash Facebook, or we love to bash, these other companies that we kind of consider to be evil corp, if I can use a Mr. Robotism there. But they responded quickly, and they responded, as well as they possibly could. And so I don't know.
We did a whole 5-minute soapbox on the Twitter stuff on that topic, on all the people who were bashing that security team and upset and like.
Well, now, do you think that Twitter turned off multi-factor on that panel when they sent all their employees home overnight and told them never to come back to work? I mean, I know that that's not public, but do you think that they made a temporary change
to their employment? I highly doubt it.
Really? Okay, because I see a lot of companies that have done that. I see a ton of companies.
I have been at companies that have done that in those situations, and it's usually not the most beneficial thing to do. Like,
no, not at all.
Good security team.
No. I'm saying that companies have disabled multi-factor, or they opened up RDP, or they opened up firewall. Just because, hey, man, it's only for a week. I mean, it's only for a week, right? And then suddenly it's been 12 weeks later, or whatever else, right?
I think we've learned, anyone that's had to deal with any sort of like network engineering or telco stuff, any of those, this is just a temporary statements is not just a temporary.
You may as well
statement.
chisel it and granite. Okay?
Exactly.
But that's the thing.
If it's got that phrase, temporary fix, you may as well chisel that. All right, that's permanent. That's good.
I really doubt they had a major change. Like, that stuff works. Like, it can happen.
Yeah. So these kids
can happen with multi-factor.
So these kids, and I'm just going to speculate like crazy because I can't get in trouble here, but these kids stumble upon this, right? And Krebs had written about this before. He's talked about this for years. Mm-hmm. There's a group of people that are obsessed with short Twitter handles, right? They want to be at Q and at one and at this and at that or whatever. And they have all kinds of skills for resetting abandoned accounts, right? They're really, really good at this. And by all looks and appearances, these kids stumble upon this type of a service, right? And more than one of them had it. So there's a race to see who can do the most damage or get the most money or do whatever else it was. But in the middle of all of that, one thing that we're not really thinking about much is, had it been weaponized differently, right, it could have caused massive societal harm, right?
Oh, God, yeah.
If Joe Biden tweeted from his verified account the morning of the election, I hereby step down and admit I've been involved in blah, 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 or whatever, you have no idea what the effect of that would be. Even if it was deleted like 2 seconds later, right? The remnants of disinformation would be just massive.
Oh, yeah.
Or stock market crashes or, whatever else. So these kids stumbled upon a nuclear weapon, basically, right? And started hitting it with a hammer.
A lot too.
They started hitting it with a hammer.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They started hitting it with a hammer, and it turns out when you hit it with a hammer, it makes some funny noises, right? and maybe generates a few dollars. But in the right hands, in different hands, it could have been
catastrophic.
Absolutely.
And Hacking Dave said the same thing. Like, it felt odd. Like, how do you stumble upon this and do that? Like, it felt odd. But
they were in a race. They were in a race. We now know there were such
a
few of them that had access to at least the quote unquote Kirk portal, right? But and so you have to hurry, and that's why you have to not necessarily use it very, very well or impactful or whatever. The other thing that was kind of crazy about that was that when it happened, there was a period of a few hours when verified people were just locked out and nothing. It was just silence. It was like crickets, right? And how weird that was. It was just weird because, of course, we're refreshing Twitter like every 5 seconds because we want to see who's next, right? And speculating about things like, oh, I would have used a different Bitcoin address.
But that's not an unsmart move, right? Like, lock out the accounts who are having the impact from that particular issue. It's not an unsmart.
Oh, I would have
move.
Taken the whole thing down if I'd been Twitter. I think I would have, at least temporarily. I would have taken the whole thing down because you don't know who's. Well, this is a great discussion. So what would you have done? We don't know
what they knew.
Yeah, what would you have done? You would have just locked the verified folks out? Because it wasn't just verified accounts, by the way. It wasn't.
It was not. The problem is it's so hard to speculate without having the visibility that they would have, right? Like, I don't know what grasp they had on the incident when it started.
So, and then we find out this week, and Exile, I'm going to encourage you to check this out. If you go into your Twitter account, there is a tool that you can download everything that Twitter has on you, including all your DMs, all your messages. I think it even keeps track of like your likes and unlikes.
And they pulled down 8 accounts worth of data.
Yeah. Well, do we really want that tool so accessible? I mean, is that really the right place for that? Like, should there be an extra step before you can dump somebody's entire? Because that's a pretty massive jump, right?
Oh, yeah. It's also admittedly incredibly common on every social media platform. I think Facebook has the same thing. Click one button, download your entire Facebook history.
And part of you is petrified to do it because you're so scared to see what they have, right? So, you're like, my God, I don't even want to know. So
admittedly, when I went through and I culled a lot of Facebook stuff, I removed most of the things from my Facebook. And I did that. So I was like, well, I don't want to lose like every picture I've ever uploaded. So like I downloaded everything I had. And then I went through and basically removed everything after that.
Now, do you trust Facebook to really remove those things, though?
I mean, I think for the most part, I do. They're going to keep it as long as they can, and I think they keep anything for 30 days. Like, that's in their terms of service. But
I always think of Ashley Madison. So Ashley Madison was the only company in history that would pay more for the fourth quarter advertisement in the Super Bowl than the first quarter, right? Sure. Every other company in the world wants the first quarter, first beginning, right? Because the fourth. Ashley Madison always wanted the fourth quarter ad because people were drunk, and they would suddenly get on the site to go look around, and then they would wake up the next morning and go, "Oh shit, what have I done?" And they had a service for $35. They would delete you ever being there. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And it turns out they never deleted anything.
Yeah, but I would almost put them in a little bit of a different boat, right? Not a multi-billion-dollar tech firm, not entirely reliant on people's trust when the people who use it are specifically untrustworthy. Like, maybe you could actually argue that they're more reliant on people's trust, which is why they failed so badly.
Oh, see, I do. I trust Twitter more than I trust Facebook.
Oh, I trust Twitter way more than I trust Facebook. I trust Google less than I trust Facebook.
Yeah, let's talk about the hierarchy of trust. Axel, who do you trust more, Apple or Google?
Yeah, neither.
No.
Neither.
So
Well,
I'm gonna say
but
Apple.
if I had to choose, I would say Apple.
Well, the reason I trust Apple is because they go out of their way to not have it at all. Like if they have their druthers,
yeah.
if they have their druthers, they have the classic, scenario like Signal, which is you can subpoena me all you want. I don't have shit. I don't. If I don't have it, you can't.
It's
compel me.
because of the business model, though.
Yeah.
Like, admittedly, in their business model, you pay a shit ton of money for a product, but you pay for a product. In the Google business model, you are the product.
For sure.
Very different business model. So and I'll say this, and I'll probably piss off a bunch of people with this, but I remember being at like an InfoSec meetup in like Maryland a couple of years ago. And it started with the guy who was running it being like, everybody congratulate my wife. She finally got off the Apple crap. And like, this is a whole group of people who are highly against Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you're highly against Facebook, but you're perfectly comfortable with Google everything. Well, yeah, why wouldn't I be? Because they have way more data on you than Facebook does. And they use it the same way Facebook does. We have an interesting duality because Google open source good. But I feel like we forget and we demonize Facebook because not open source and steals data. But like Google steals a shit ton of data. Like that's their whole business model.
And most people who are not technical have fallen into the fallacy of futility. Like, I can't. There's no such thing as privacy, so why should I even bother, right? They know everything about me anyway, so whatever. There's no reason for me to lock my doors because anybody in the world can pick a lock, right?
If they want to break in, they'll break in.
Yeah, which is really very dangerous because I will tell you, like if you talk to your non-technical friends, if you were to just talk to 3 or 4 non-technical friends and you were to ask them, hey, does Facebook record your phone and like advertise based on the things that you're chatting about? At least half people in the world are convinced that that is the case, right? That is going on, and it really wouldn't surprise us if it was, right? Like we wouldn't really be that shocked by it.
Did you see the data tracking story from months and months ago? I think it was in the Times, where they were able to take anonymized GPS data from people's phones that was sold to ad companies, track it to individual people,
100%.
specifically like people who worked in the Pentagon, and
Absolutely.
their home and their kids' school. Like
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Well, and there were data brokers that would tell you anything about anybody based on cell records without, it was like $12 to tell you, there is definitely some leaky stuff, right? Cambridge Analytica pioneered the idea that I can get a dossier with 2,000 or 3,000 data points on you based on the way you type, the cookies, the cross-site scripting or the cross-site references.
Yeah.
There's just a ton of stuff that they could do to get really, really scientific about it, right?
I saw today that Twitter was thinking about opening up a potential subscription option. And like, I will tell you, if that means no ads and no tracking, I will pay for that shit in a heartbeat. Because like, I'm happy. I will give you more than my value, which my social media value is like 56 cents or something.
So you're not surfing behind a pie hole and ad blockers.
I am surfing behind a pie hole and all that stuff, but still, I'll still pay Twitter. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Because companies have bypassed all that with inline ads and all that stuff. So like, it doesn't matter.
The current workaround on Twitter, by the way, is if you have a Mac, to go to the Mac App Store and run the Mac Catalina Catalyst app.
I'm running that right now.
There's no ads. There's no commercials. There's no inline ads on there. At least there's not supposed to be anyway. I don't know if they've changed that. But yeah, you should not see promoted tweets anymore at all. But when you switch back to the browser, you're like shocked by how many there are.
Oh my God.
It's a crazy amount, right?
It's every third tweet anymore.
And I think TweetDeck is that way too. TweetDeck is that way too. But
Any of the third-party services don't do promoted ads, but they have no API access.
Yeah. No. Do both of you guys have a Pi-hole? Do you both have Raspberry Pi with Pi-hole loaded?
So I have a Pi-hole and a full Ubiquity stack at home.
Oh, you have the Ubiquity. Okay, so yeah, good. You got to go on. Well, so what's so funny about the Pi-hole is it almost reminds me of uBlock Origin a few years ago. When you get used to having it, and then one day you touch somebody else's computer that like it doesn't have it at all, you're just absolutely shocked. Like, oh my God, is this what the internet is like? If you go to USA Today, like there's 75% of the page is covered by ads with autoplay. What the hell happened? At what point did this go on?
It drastically changes your internet experience.
Yeah.
I don't, but I really only have one system that I use, and I do run U-Matrix for all the browsers, and I run very little desktop apps. I force everything to go through the browser so that I get super granular control over everything that's able to run.
I thought you were going to say, yeah, everything's in the sandbox, and I've got containers, I've got containers on containers, and 3 proxies, and
I mean, if someone wants to get access to the photos that I've been taking or recording the podcast, like most of it's already shared anyway. So
That's actually fairly accurate. Yeah.
now, have you guys ever considered having advertisers on this program?
So we have been approached a couple times about that and staunchly refuse.
yep, that was actually part of our first conversation before
was.
we even recorded the first episode.
Was
Before
no
we-
commercials?
Before we agreed to do it together, we agreed that we both wanted it to be unsponsored.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
we didn't want to compromise our integrity or our belief structure.
So on the Tribe of Hackers, we do reverse sponsorships, which is each guest has to bring a nonprofit that they want to promote, or a charity, or a profession, or a project, or something like that, right? And it is actually pretty interesting because a lot of the times, like EFF doesn't get a lot of publicity or advertising or whatever, but then there's also some other smaller ones that are,
Sure.
that are particularly interesting and good causes. Like a lot
I
of people,
actually really like the idea, and I've been thinking about stealing it since you told me about
dude,
it.
you should totally do it. You should totally do it. But you
And-
make the guests do the heavy work because you don't want to vet them all.
And-
you don't
yeah,
have to
this-
spend your time vetting them.
And this month was our like reassess month anyway, because we made the change in January to go to a special guest every other week. So
Yep.
we're in time. We're set up for another change.
Now, do you enjoy this? Are you having fun
Oh, yeah.
podcasting right now? Like, is this a good time right this second?
Oh God, yeah! It's a conversation, man. Like I love having conversations about this stuff.
Well, I like learning about it. I mean, I think it's neat the way that you spend almost you have 0 scripts, no script.
Yep.
That's
no
the
planned
funnest
agenda.
part about it, though. Like, we talked a lot about the things that we wanted to talk about before we started, and every time I mention pre-show, people go, "I want to listen to that conversation." But either way, like we talked a lot about what we wanted to talk about, and we went down 20 tangents that we had no plan on. Like that's amazing.
Yep.
I love that.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, let me ask you this, guys. Let me ask you this question: are you reading any physical books right now? Do you have any books like nonfiction or fiction that you're actually reading right now?
So I'll
Yes.
start this off, but I will answer the question if you also promise to answer the question, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. So yes, I recently picked up some graphic novels. I picked up the full series of Sword Daughter from Dark Horse Comics, which is described as a Viking revenge saga told like samurai cinema style.
Mm-hmm.
And a graphic novel called Punk Rock Jesus, where they clone the DNA of Jesus Christ, and he ends up becoming a punk rock lead singer.
way!
Yeah.
I
This is
feel like I
a-
heard
this
of
is-
that before.
This is like a comic book, or what we used to call a comic book.
yeah.
It's a graphic novel, yeah.
And it's Jesus as a punk rocker.
Yep.
Does he have special powers? Like can he send lightning bolts into the audience and stuff?
I haven't seen that, but I know one of the main images is him shouting "fuck you."
Can he turn water into wine? Because that's always been like the best trick in the world,
I mean,
right?
if he's real punk rock, it's going to be the cheapest beer that's around.
it turns it into draft swill.
Yeah, PBR.
So I have to admit, COVID has actually been really good for me reading.
Really?
Because when I was commuting a lot for work, I did a lot of audiobooks, and then I kind of just died off on reading when I wasn't commuting a lot. And then COVID started, and I've read 8 books since COVID started. And that 7 of them was the entire Harry Potter series. Again, I'm a huge fantasy nerd. I love Harry Potter. I love Forgotten Realms stories, specifically by R.A. Salvatore. And I was audiobooking the Aragon Inheritance cycle before when I was traveling last year. And I was on the 4th book, which is the last book. And I just started reading that one again.
Really?
I'm going to finish that book, and I'm going to finish it physically. And then graphic novel wise for Exiled, Scott Pilgrim, which will probably always be my favorite graphic novel of all time.
Yeah, so the only graphic novel that I've really read in the last few years was The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead, that's a
Fantastic.
graphic novel, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And
And I read it on the
highly-
iPad. I read it in a night. I would just tear through like 20 episodes. And what's crazy about The Walking Dead is he used to answer every letter that people would write to him.
Mm-hmm.
So you would end up spending like 2 hours reading the letters and like 20 minutes reading the actual, panels or whatever, which is at least the beginning. But I think he's done now. That's finished, right?
I think
Robert
so.
Kirkman.
I would
So
highly suggest the 7 volumes of Scott Pilgrim.
I'm going to read
It
Scott
is-
Pilgrim. I'm
It
going
is
to.
a wonderfully nerdy, awesome
Now I have to get the
adventure
physical
story.
books and be careful with my greasy fingers and stuff, right? I can't do this on the iPad.
Oh no, I do. I read everything on my iPad.
Okay, good. Oh, yeah, that's way better. Okay, good.
Yeah, I read
No, I totally will do
everything
that.
on my iPad.
I'll tell. We'll trade. I'll read Scott Pilgrim's graphic novels, but you have to read one of the two things I'm about to tell you. That's
Okay.
the deal. You get to pick which one. Okay. And the first one is a little bit embarrassing on a backstory because I traveled a lot, 48, 49 weeks
Sure.
a year, 250,000 miles, just a ton of time on airplanes and Marriotts, right? Everybody always thinks it's glamorous, but it really ultimately is kind of a miserable, lonely existence. Well, I probably shouldn't overstate it that way because I do miss it quite a bit. But anyway. So at some point in my life, I'm not a theater guy. I'm not a music theater guy. I'm not a Broadway guy. But at some point in my life, I ended up going and seeing Hamilton in Chicago and loved it. Okay. And it got to the point where I would social engineer my way into Hamilton in every city that was showing, whether it was Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, London. I would either SE my way in, or I would enter the lottery, or I would literally just beg strangers, hey, do you have an extra ticket? I really want to go in and see this. And it worked, believe it or not. So I've seen this thing like 17 times in like 13 cities. Okay, whatever, it's a ridiculous number. Really, really, really good show. Well, Disney just premiered it, the movie.
They did, yeah.
Like 2 weeks ago. And I remembered that in my list of things to do for like 3 or 4 years now has been to read the original book. Because the book, Lin-Manuel Miranda based the entire musical on this book. And the book is incredible. I mean, it's written like a novel, okay? It's not humorous, it's not it's not a rap type of thing or whatever, but it's just a fascinating story. And it's really thick, and it's really, really detailed, and it's very, very long. And I want to say Chinra or Chinroth is the author or something like that. I'll definitely make sure that you get that piece, but that's one. And then you guys had Kim Zetter on a few weeks ago, so I'm rereading Zero Day. I'm rereading the Stuxnet book right now.
So I'm glad you give me that option because I never read that.
Oh, it is so
when
good.
We had Kim on.
Oh, it is so good.
And in the middle of the episode of talking to Kim, I admitted at the beginning that I didn't have it.
Oh, I heard
at
you.
the end, I told her that I Amazoned it. So it's sitting on my shelf back there, I think, or out there.
Oh, it's so good.
It's on my reading list to actually read like the paperback cover, not the iPad version, because I ordered it after she came on the show.
Yeah, and there's another There's another one that everybody goes crazy for, and I'm gonna get it wrong. It's either Sandworm or Sandstorm. Yes. Oh, that's also really, really good. It's like crazy good. But you might not want to read InfoSec books. Like you may need to be taking a break away from InfoSec
I
because
fully plan on reading at least Countdown to Zero Day. I'd like to get to Sandworm at some point. I admit that I'm a huge fantasy nerd, though, and like most of my books are fantasy things. Like I was doing Dresden Files when I was commuting a lot. There was a time that I was commuting like 6 hours a day in my car to go like 100 miles because DC.
We need to get you a Tesla, man. We got to get you a Tesla. That's got to be a goal.
I admit that I bought a BMW when I started doing it.
Well, they have some pretty good adaptive cruise control kind of stuff that takes a lot of the lifting off, right?
Yeah. Well, and then I just, ended up moving, and now I'm 15 minutes away from the office that I don't go to.
But it won't always be like that, right? Or will it?
I mean, I'll be 15 minutes or less away from my office when we go back to work. I get the benefit of working in the old AOL headquarters, like where AOL started.
Ooh, you're doxing yourself. We know
everybody
exactly
knows where I work, man.
Is that Herndon? Is that 15 minutes from Herndon or Ashburn? It's one of those, right?
It's in that general vicinity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool.
I mean, that campus is super cool. Like, I like that campus.
What now? So, like in the TV show Survivor, or like in the TV show Big Brother or whatever, one of the things that the hostages or the contestants, whatever, always do is they always say, "What's the first thing you're gonna do when you get out?" or whatever, right? Have you guys thought about what's the first thing you're gonna do when this is truly?
Dude, I'm gonna go to my favorite pizza place.
Oh, you haven't been to a pizza place?
I'm gonna go to my favorite pizza place. I've had a lot of pizza, but I haven't gone to my favorite. I haven't had my favorite pizza.
What about you? Have you thought this one through, Exile?
Yes, I have. So considering reasonable expectation is this isn't going to happen until next year, and I made a goal in 2018 to do one international trip every year since I'm able to actually travel now. So I'm gonna do my international trip next year, as soon as I can.
So what are you gonna do?
I'm gonna have a beer first of all because I've not had a beer. I've not had a beer since March 3rd. Okay, that's the first and foremost. I mean we may not make it till the that may be happening here in an hour or so. But that's definitely one thing. And then physical contact with friends and really appreciating. Like we see each other and we give each other a hug or high five or whatever. Like that little tiny bit of skin contact with people that are in your immediate family is, man, I miss that.
Like I can't wait to get back to a conference. Like I really can't. And like I'm not an extroverted person. Like I'm an introvert. I do pretty well by myself. But like I can't wait to get back to a conference. Like I'm so excited to see people again. And like be in public vicinity with people again and like be able to give somebody a hug, like you mentioned. Like that is going to be wonderful.
Of course, we don't know that it's going to be like a light switch either. Like it won't just suddenly be like one day.
Hey, I'll take being 6 feet away from him in a mask at this point.
Yeah, well, and assuming that we, have a vaccine or something, a therapeutic that's effective enough to basically negate any real concerns or whatever. Mm-hmm. That is. Well, we haven't had new content on Netflix or television or movies, really. The content well is running a little bit dry right now.
Did you watch Flora's Lava? Because it's brilliant.
No, I did not. I have not.
You should. It's brilliant.
Spell that. What, is it on Amazon Prime? What is that?
It's on Netflix, and it's called Floor is Lava. So, like, do you remember?
Oh, it's a game show. It's a game show.
Oh, yeah. But it's a group of 3 people who have to get through 70,000 gallons of slime in an obstacle course where it's all red and bubbling and stuff like the floor.
All right, I'll have to watch it now. I've got to.
It's pretty incredible.
I'm going to have to because I really don't have that much. Like normally in my pre pandemic days, my normal mode for watching television is I always have a laptop or an iPad or something. I'm always multitasking, right? I've always got the TV on in the background showing something.
I'm the same way.
As a matter of fact, the reason that the show Narcos is so impactful to me is because I don't speak Spanish, so I have to actually read the subtitles. So it's like the only show that I actually like sit down and actually physically give my full attention to, or whatever that is. But these days, I don't really want to watch the news that much because we have way too much news on Twitter, way too much day to day. I don't think we're mentally equipped to handle 24 hours of catastrophe and hope and everything
Sometimes
else, right?
you need a little pleasant fantasy.
Yeah, for sure. And but so I'm looking forward to that. And then even physically going to the movies. Like we have this thing called Alamo Drafthouse, which is
Dude, we have Alamo Drafthouse.
Oh, come on, man. Come on. That's like the greatest
Alamo
thing in the world. They come along and they tell you to shut the fuck up if you're talking. Yep. The guy comes along and says, you need to shut the fuck up. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, okay? If somebody gets their phone out, they kick them out. Right?
Like full service bar and restaurant on top of that with wait service in the middle of your movie.
Yeah, I really hope they're. I hope they come out of this okay, because that would be a national massive loss if we lost Alamo Drafthouse. So
I think though, on a positive side with the movie experience, even if it takes a little bit longer than we want to be able to go back to sit inside a building and watch a movie, there's been a growing resurgence of drive-in theaters. People are repurposing parking lots and stuff like that to do drive-in theaters, and I kind of miss drive-in theaters.
But they won't make me a pizza and an alcoholic milkshake and set it in front of me.
But you can do it in your car.
That's true.
I mean,
I can make myself a pizza and an alcoholic milkshake.
They still have the walk-up windows, right? So it's basically just plop a food cart down or a couple food carts down, have the walk-up windows so you can still socially distance, and then take everything back to your car. And then truck beds become useful again in the city instead of just another piece to show off status.
There you go.
So I want to ask you guys another question because I know they just keep popping in my head, and I'm allowed to do that.
So, hey Ray, maybe you should save these questions up and have us on your podcast.
There you go. That's a great idea.
No, he can't. We're not in the book.
Oh,
we get in the book for that.
Well, we need to get you in the book then. That's one thing leads to another. So, so you guys started this because you wanted to have a pure blue team,
yes,
kind of a chill out, safe place or whatever, right? Did you accomplish? Have you accomplished everything that you wanted to with regards to the podcast? Is this what you were hoping it would become?
I think so in a lot of ways. Like it wasn't just to have a pure blue team experience. which Blue Team in the greater hacker community, like Blue Team is kind of underrepresented in the overall community. So we wanted a resource for people in defensive infosec, especially because far more people work in defensive than offensive infosec.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to have a resource for them, but it wasn't necessarily about like the super technical, hyper technical guys. You know, they're the Nick Carrs of the world, and those individuals do that really, really well. Like that's their sweet spot. I think Exiled and I both, at the end of the day, are mentors. Like I manage people. Like I'm a leader. I run SOCs. So like I'm a mentor first and a teacher, and I like that. So this was an opportunity to teach and start talking about things at an accessible level rather than a hyper technical level, where we could have that conversation and make the concept of doing this relatively accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And based on the feedback, I think we have done that.
I think so too. Yeah, that was part of it, but I also had a selfish motivation in that I wanted to provide a resource that I wanted when I started in the industry that wasn't there.
Okay.
So, yeah, when I got my first job as a SOC analyst, I wanted to know more. And every place that I looked, maybe it was just because of my locality, it was all either super advanced technical stuff that I needed to do the trial by fire to learn to get to that place where that would actually be relevant, or it was very pen testing, red team focused. And so the resources were not there unless you spent a lot of your personal time digging in, which is good, is a good trait, but at the same time, I wanted something that was not everybody has it. And as someone that worked or grew up from drug addicted parents, in and out of homelessness for a while, like having something a little bit more accessible to people that didn't take as much resources up front is something that I wanted to provide.
So yeah, that's going to take us into a topic that I know we want to talk about, because this is going to be our longest show ever, and that's okay. But there's two things that I have to say first. One, this is going to be our longest show ever. Two, when you write the description, Exiled, make sure you say, join us on this episode where Ray Redacted interviews us.
Okay. Well, first of all, you mentioned and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I've heard other people describe themselves as saying, I felt damaged, or I felt like I'd had a past that, maybe wasn't conducive to making the kind of money that people can make in InfoSec, or even the path to become a CISO, right? That side. Well, the bad news is, the really, really bad news is that the vast majority of people in InfoSec, probably 80 or 90%, feel the same way. Like they've had some type of personal trauma, some type of personal damage. The first time I ever gave a mental health talk, I actually hired a company to go figure out how many people in our industry had been affected by childhood sexual trauma. And they told me they couldn't tell me, but they thought it was somewhere between priest and police officer, which is incredibly high. Like we're talking 16 to 30-fold the general population. So as much as 80 or 90% of us have been affected by childhood sexual trauma, either ourselves or someone that we knew. And in most cases, it was not something that was treated, right? Like it didn't have cognitive therapy or even proper medications. Some of us maybe took antidepressants or brain drugs or nootropics, just almost like a brain hacking kind of an experiment, but not necessarily medically supervised or properly or whatever else, right? So there is this new kind of attitude, which is it's okay to be in therapy. It's okay to talk through some of these other things. And most importantly of all, it's vital to break those cycles, right? Because, if you're victimized as a child, whether you like it or not, you're not going to become a perpetrator, but there will be a continued cycle of victimhood for going forward and going on and on and on.
It's one of the things that I really appreciate about mental health hackers, and a lot of the work that you do with them too, is this concept that this is very much an industry in a lot of ways for the misfits, or the people who consider themselves as that, right?
Sure.
The people who didn't fit in, the people who were abused, the people who suffer from different things.
Sure.
But at the same time, it feels like even within the community, so many people for so long were afraid to admit that.
Sure.
Like I've up until, I can't say that I've ever been particularly open about my past or abuse or depression or any of that stuff. And it just wasn't something that you talked about. And I think, what y'all are doing and what so many people are doing, shining a light on it and letting everybody know that it's okay. And for the most part, the data that says we're pretty much all like that.
Yeah.
like,
sure.
is really helpful.
For sure. And you can't, like, as a blue teamer, you're never going to fully win, right? It's a journey. It's not a destination, so to speak, right?
Oh yeah.
And so, if I get to give you a detection, do I get to give you a detection, or do you have to cut me off if I give you a detection?
We do the detection last.
Okay, well, I'll save
the
the detection. I'll save the detection for the end there. But it's okay to not be okay, right? It was okay not to be okay before COVID, but it's definitely okay to not be okay right now. As a matter of fact, I would be shocked if most people are okay right now, right? And I mean, my therapist is not okay. I mean, the Amazon Prime delivery driver is not okay. I mean, the police officers that are engaging in just horrible abuse in Portland are not okay. The reporters that are reporting on it are not okay. There's a lot of folks out there that are not doing well right now, period. And it's all right to talk about it, and it's all right to try to fix it, right? So that's one of the big key takeaways is we really need to get rid of the stigma of crazy or non-neurotypical or weird or any of those types of things. Can kind of put those aside, because I've not yet met anybody normal yet.
Right?
Right?
It's one of the things that actually led me to even where I work, because my CISO was openly bipolar and would talk about it and ran our neurodiversity employee resource group and was very, very big on mental health. And like, it's one of the things that I really appreciated about the place that I work is having somebody who can be so open about that, and having somebody who was so open about that stuff, because it's important, right? Like, it's important for people to be able to talk about that stuff and be open about it and not be judged for it. And when you look at somebody who's a CISO of a major company who can do that, like, it's inspiring to the rest of us out there who, like, you know what, maybe we can do that.
So maybe we should give Kanye West a little bit of a break. Maybe we should let him have a little bit of room, a little bit of slack. Maybe we really literally should leave Britney alone, right? Maybe literally, because everybody's fighting a battle, right? Everybody is. That's out there. Now, the only reason that I kind of joke about Kanye is he also wants to be in charge of the nuclear weapons of the United States. So I think you put yourself up to a little bit more scrutiny when you run for president, especially nowadays. We're going to scrutinize. Yeah. We're definitely going to look into that. But for folks that out there that are listening to this and they're kind of interested in it, I would encourage you to do some research, just like any other hacking topic, right? To dig into it and figure out neurotransmitters and what the body's what effect exercise has on you versus sleep. Sleep has always been kind of like the biggest mystery to me of all, right? Because I never really slept well ever, right? It was always kind of an insomniac, and
I feel that,
and all these other types of things. And I got to tell you, and this is not an insult on you guys. I really don't want you to be upset by this, but I learned the most effective way to go to sleep ever is to simply listen to podcasts. I force my eyes closed and I put on a podcast. And if I listen for an hour and a half, hey, that's fine. If I listen for 20 minutes, that's fine. Either way, the brain, you dream along with it sometimes too. Yeah. So
I am not insulted. I am happy we can help you in some way.
Well, and I will tell you, don't do it to Darknet Diaries, because with Darknet Diaries, there's so much music and there's a lot of eerie kind of back and forth, whatever. That's the one.
Or
you
stuff
can't.
Like Serial, because I don't know if going to sleep is story.
Yeah, but like these kind of conversations, right? What I used to do back before COVID was I would listen to, like, for example, I would listen to detections and fall asleep maybe 20 minutes in. And then the next morning I would get in the car and I'd be playing it again. But I remembered everything. Like I remembered, oh no, he's going to, like almost like deja vu, right? Which I'm sure that there are sleep experts out there that are saying, Ray, that is a horrible, horrible habit to get yourself into. It's awful to do. But my wife lets me do it, so it's good.
I mean, I think it's important to find what works for you too.
Like, well, sure, and I tried everything. I mean, I tried like the herbal medicines, and
I'm a brain on person. So like I love TV and I love audio and I love that stuff because it lets me focus on something and stop my brain. I can't sleep without sound or something else that I can focus on. It's just not how I'm wired. Like I need something to take my focus away from my own brain if I'm going to go to sleep. Like that's just how I am.
So you'll fall asleep watching the television and just be on.
I fall asleep watching the television almost every night.
And do you put a timer on it?
I do not. But
you should put a timer on it.
So it ends after like I don't have any of the settings playing that keep it on. Yeah, I'm all digital, man.
Okay,
So like,
okay.
there's no settings that keep episodes going. So if I don't press play on the next episode, that's it. I'm done.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Netflix always says, "Are you still there? Are you still there?" And I always feel like, "Quit attacking me, okay? I'm still here. All right? You're trying to criticize me." But I use Overcast is the player. I use Overcast, and you can set a timer to 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or whatever. I usually set it to like an hour, and I never make it the full hour. Like very, very, very rarely, will I do that. But I also do typically I like some of the shorter podcasts as well too, because like Joe Rogan, sometimes he'll just keep you up because you're just listening. So right now, people are listening to this. They're probably going, "Oh my god, he won't let me go to sleep."
So we originally started to try to be a shorter podcast, then realized there was no way we were going to cover our content block in a shorter period of time.
But it's so conversational, right? I mean, it really doesn't feel like you're trying to accomplish, like you're not going through a list, right?
No, on our non-guest episodes, and you've listened, we do news and a topic and all that other stuff. But when we have a guest on, like we just go where the conversation takes us, and we hope that other people find that interesting. Because I'm finding it interesting, so I'm just hoping that other people do too.
But now, is there a timer on this? I don't even know. Is there? I'm not even. I'm watching
We're at an hour 15.
Oh, that's not that long. Come on, man. A CD is 74 minutes. The old school CDs were 74. Remember that number? That was like a magical number, right? So.
Yeah. Back when you looked for either the 70 or 80 megabyte CDs to get either 12 or 16 songs on a single CD.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. They had overburns. And, oh, my God, guys. I'm so old that I had to explain to somebody the other day. Actually, it was my son. It was my son who's now discovering Python and all kinds of crap because he wants to write bots for Discord. Not because he wants to change the world, because he wants to write bots. But anyway,
that's a start.
Yeah, for sure. And but I had to explain to him that when I was his age, or a little bit younger than his age, you could take a hole punch and turn a floppy disk into a double-sided floppy disk. You could literally double the capacity if you punched a hole in the right place, right? So to speak. And it just magically worked. And then the other one that I just remembered the other day was there was a product in the 90s called RAM Doubler that was literally a program that pretended to double your RAM, like that would actually do virtual memory or whatever else, which probably doesn't work when you have a terabyte of RAM or whatever that is, but definitely kind of changed. So tell me, what do you think the blue team is going to look like in 5 years from now? Have you guys thought that through yet?
Do you want my honest opinion? I have a fear that security operations centers and the other things that have been genuinely, I don't want to say demonized, but viewed poorly and given little to no trust, which my Circle City Con talk was literally on give your SOC people some trust and some ability to actually do their job. I have a fear that it's not going to go that way as much as I want it to. And I have a fear that it's going to go more the way of minimum wage tier 1 help desk. And everything's going to go downhill and become less about actually being a security professional and more about somebody who clicks a button.
Oh, really?
I really do. I actually have a fear the whole industry is going to go that way. In a lot of senses. I mean, that's every vendor's dream, right? Pay for us and then you don't need people. That's how SOARs are marketed, and that's how so much stuff is marketed. So I have a fear that we're going down that path, and I'm viciously fighting at every conference that I get in through this podcast to try to remind people the importance of an educated individual. And I don't mean educated traditionally. I'm not educated traditionally. I mean like somebody who actually has the ability to do critical thought and investigate to do their job well. So I'm hoping that I maybe can help a little bit to curb the trend. And I mean, I'm walking on the path of Chris Sanders and guys like that who've done far more wonderful work on that topic. He was one of my favorite guests to interview, actually.
Now, you're not supposed to have favorites, first of all.
I know, but still, it doesn't matter. He totally is. Like, Chris Sanders is like one of my heroes, man.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Kim Zetter, oh my God. I mean, that's pretty.
That was amazing.
That is pretty awesome and amazing. Well, so I actually disagree with you. I think that.
I hope I'm wrong.
I think for the next
Look at that,
few years.
just skipped right over me and went back to his answer.
Oh, no. You get to decide. You get to be the deciding vote. You get to be the deciding vote. Actually, the whole point of this is I'm going to counter, and then you're going to tell us who was right.
All right. I like that.
This is Lincoln Douglas modified debate or something.
Yeah,
okay.
I like that spin. I mean, pitch.
Yeah, so I actually think that AI is going to be an advantage for Blue for the next few years, but then eventually the bad guys are going to have that, and then I think all bets are kind of off, so to speak. But the idea and the complaint of what we think are attacks today, there's probably going to be new kinds that we haven't even thought of. So now that's my answer, Exiled. You get to now declare who was incorrect. You don't get to say who was right. You get to say who was wrong.
I thought we're supposed to only talk in terms of positive and reinforce the correct things.
Okay. All right.
Man, so that is a really good question. I actually think it's some of column A and some of column B, and I'm not saying that just to try to placate, but I think we're going to see a wave over 5 years in that once we get out of COVID, there will be the hiring spree to bring people on to get things caught up to deal with the situation, to get that automation in place, and then it'll dip down. And then we'll see a split between button pushers and then only highly trained people that deal with automation output.
And
there will be no middle ground. It'll either be low-end button pushers or highly
high-end.
expertise. Yeah.
Now, there's one thing that I didn't consider, and I don't know that any of us has fully considered. Ray, you got closest by talking about AI, but that will be how quantum computing changes the game if it exists.
Oh, well, sure. Well, sure.
If it exists in 5 years.
Yeah, well, no, it definitely will exist in 5 years. We just don't know how many qubits or how effective it'll be, right?
Yeah, I have to make an assumption that there's a part of this that is always going to be almost impossible as quantum computing becomes a standard. So it will exist in 5 years, but it might not be a standard in 5 years as it starts to become regular.
Yeah, so I will tell you, it's as certain as when black and white televisions were out, everybody was predicting that eventually they would be fully color, right? Of course, they also all predicted that we would have video phones too, and they were almost right, almost correct, to that point or whatever. So, but it will be definitely interesting, and I think that the post-COVID effects will probably last at least 5 years, maybe 10 years, afterwards, because we won't take so much stuff for granted.
And well, I mean, one of the other interesting things about COVID is also, in a lot of senses, the focus on security as well. Specifically because COVID has been a time that has been super rife for attackers.
Sure.
Like, we've seen way more attacks. We've seen way more successful social engineering throughout COVID than we have in the past. So, it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like long term.
A lot of time on their hands. A lot of people with a lot of time on their hands, and nothing. Not a lot on Netflix.
Exactly. As well as network structure.
Do you think that the Detections podcast will be season 7, episode 13?
Oh, I have no idea.
Hey, I don't know either. I'm just happy when we make it every 6 months at this point.
You don't have a 5-year plan?
No. I mean, if we were running this like a business, maybe, but my whole theory with anything like this is we do it till it's not fun and then we're done.
Okay. All right. Well, I haven't actually thought that far ahead for Tribe of Hackers podcast, but the guests continue to show up, and so if you're listening to this week's episode, by the way, you should definitely check out the episode with Snow, who's a social engineer, because I interviewed her last night, and it's definitely good. So I am blatantly plugging the podcast at this point. That's TOH
you
podcast.
Are more than welcome to blatantly plug the podcast, and it'll be linked in the description.
Yeah. So, Ray, there is definitely no problem with that. With how much you do on the back end for just everything around the community, that I think the majority of people don't realize just how much you do on the backside to support the community.
Oh, yeah.
Plug the fuck away.
Okay.
Plus,
Yeah.
selfishly, it seems like from what you were saying earlier, you're the guy who can get us in the book.
Yeah. No. Well, so it's like the cult of the dead cow. You're not supposed to ever ask. If you have to ask, then you can't come in, right? That's the.
So we didn't ask to get in the book. We asked to get on the
You're
podcast.
the guy who could do it.
That was always the CDC's number one rule: was if you asked, you weren't. You absolutely weren't allowed in to do that. Well, it has been absolutely awesome talking about this. We never talked about 3 of the things that I did want to make sure we talked about, which is the upcoming Blue Team Village that's going to be at DEF CON, the Mental Health Hackers Village, which is at Black Hat that's coming up, and Diana Initiative, which is coming up later in August, and all are virtual. to varying degrees using Discord, which I know you guys are both big fans of Discord because you have a very, very active Discord community for detections or
And
sub
game.
community, I guess, right? It's
Sub-community.
it's part of a Dead Pixel Sec, right?
Yep.
And so that'll be particularly interesting. And then I think I'm going to be ready to collapse after.
Oh, I believe it.
After that piece, when September comes.
The one shout out I want to make about the Blue Team Village stuff, and you should check out Diana Initiative, you should check out Mental Health Hackers, like 100% absolutely. But we have to give a shout out on Blue Team Village because our old friends OpenSock are going back and doing another virtual OpenSock challenge with Blue Team Village at DEF CON.
Now, why don't you join that? Why don't you guys?
Because I'm going to be out of town that week.
That's right. Okay.
I'm already registered.
I'm so bummed about it. But we played Camp COVID, which was super duper fun. And I love everything that the Recon InfoSec folks do. They were also like a really fun group to have on. We had Whitney and Eric come on and chat. I played OpenSock last year at DEF CON, although minimally, but I still played. And I love their form of training and how they approach training and stuff. And like, I cannot encourage all of you enough to sign up for OpenSock. It will be one of the coolest training experiences in CTFs you ever do in your life, especially if you do defensive stuff.
Now this is a CTF. This is not a tabletop game, right? Because you do tabletop too, right? You're a real big tabletop board game kind of guy too.
I am.
Have you done backdoors and breaches?
I have.
So I've never done that before. I'm just now learning about this. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what it is. But
so I probably have about 5 copies of it.
It's like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's simulating breaches,
Kind of.
right?
So Backdoors and Breaches is the card game version.
Yeah.
The more what you're talking about is what Black Hills calls cubicles and compromises.
Okay.
Which is what started it all.
And is there like one dude in charge, like a dungeon master or a game master?
And in Backdoors and Breaches, it's the same thing. So
Okay.
You draw cards that lay out your incident. And then a team can either get drawn cards that give them bonuses if they're taking that action, or you can, if you're in an organization, you can use the things that you have in that organization, which give you die roll bonuses.
Yeah. So think of it this way. If you think about Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition right now, you have the actual full core rule set to do custom development of stuff, or you have the quick start box that has everything to go. Backdoors and Breaches is the quick start box. Cubicles and Compromises is the full game.
Now, are we 100% sure that we're not living inside one of those games right now?
I mean, we do have jokes about people wanting 2020 simulation to end and to reset, so that is a very real possibility.
More likely to be more Matrixy VR.
13th floor. I think it's very much like a 13th floor kind of thing.
I'm also a fan, though, like, and, nobody who listens to this can see, but I have a VR headset behind me.
Oh, I did. I got an Oculus for the conference, for one of the conferences, for Alt VR. Or what,
okay,
it was interesting. I got an Oculus Quest, the standalone one.
The Quest is my favorite, and I have a Vive, and then I have the Quest, and I love the Quest.
Because you don't have to hook it up to a computer, right? You don't have to hook it up to the PC.
I can take it in my living room. I can take it in a park. Like, it's just.
Oh, you're really not supposed to use it in the sunshine, though. It's like you can destroy your eyes or something. Something bad happens in the sun.
I can take it to a park at night.
Oh yeah, okay.
But no,
I'm sure
just
people
in
are
general,
looking at you like, oh my god, what is that guy doing?
God, yeah, I really do love the Oculus. But as we continue through, we hit the other 3 things that you wanted to talk about, and again, like you do so much shit, man. So like I knew this was going to be a long one and a good one.
Yep.
And from me to you, and from detections to you, like, just know, like, we appreciate all of the shit that you do.
Yeah.
And one of my kind of 2020 resolutions in this shitty time is to tell people more that I appreciate them for the things that they do, because that's something that we forget as humans a lot. So like, I'm telling you that, like, I appreciate all of the shit that you do in InfoSec, both behind the scenes and in front of it.
Well, thank you very much for that. So please plug my podcast more often, and we can call it Even Steven.
For sure.
I'll step it up one more and say that we love having you on, and we love everything that you do and that you are.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, let me give you my detections, okay?
Yes, let's do it.
And the detections, not surprisingly, has to do with mental health, okay? And that is... as you become a hacker and you get into the InfoSec community, at some point in time, you become a middle manager, right? On your journey to become CISO or CTO or maybe just, a director of a NOC or whatever that is, right? One of the big reasons that happens in that journey is you have to learn to manage people. And it's not a skill that necessarily comes easily at all. It's much easier to be a bad manager than a good manager. But one of the things that you can do and that you can remind yourself during COVID and all the time is to think about people's mental state at any given time when they screw up or when they don't screw up, because it is something that we don't usually talk about in business very often. How is that person actually doing? What's actually going on with them? Are they depressed? Are they acting differently, et cetera? Those types of things. And I think that will make you a better manager. So my detection is to pay attention to the mental states of those around you. And it never, ever hurts to be empathic about the emotions of other people.
I could do a whole
Absolutely.
episode on leadership style and the difference between being a leadership and a manager.
Well, most people hate the manager stuff, just like most people hate public speaking, right? So one of the reasons people have said to me, why do so many of you think that you have to do public speaking? Well, you don't. You absolutely don't. You don't even have to go to conferences at all. But
you don't
if you
have
want
to
to become
be a manager either.
But if you want to become a CISO, like if you want to take this as far as you possibly can, at some point you're going to have to learn to effectively communicate written and unfortunately, if you're going to be talking to board members, you're going to have to be able to do a PowerPoint presentation or two somewhere along the lines. But again, your journey doesn't have to be that way. And one thing we really didn't talk about today, which maybe is a whole nother episode, is about gate smashing and about opening up our industry to become more newbie friendly. Because my intent for the Tribe of Hackers podcast was not to teach noobs, but there's a joke that some of the guests have said that you're race-planning because, like, for example, telling the world's FOIA expert in the world what a Freedom of Information Act stands for. That's race-planning because I'm doing that for the podcast audience, right?
Sure.
I'm hoping that newbies will be listening to this and be like picking up on things like that. And I know it works because my mom tells me, "Oh, I know what social engineering is now. I never understood that."
We did cover that a little bit when you asked us why we started this podcast.
For sure. Make it approachable. Make it approachable, right? Make it approachable because this industry should be, the more diverse it is, the more different viewpoints we have, the more representation we have from socioeconomic and ability levels and, neurotypical levels and everything else. Neurodivergence, I should say, not neurotypical levels, but neurodivergence. That makes us better. It's a better team. Whether you're playing a board game or you're playing in real life, maybe they're the same thing.
I have a saying that I say to every person that I hire, and it doesn't. This extends from the intern up, right? Like I say this to my interns as well. I hired you for a reason, and I hired you because you have value. In order for me to get that value, you need to not be afraid to speak, you need to provide your opinion, and you need to be able to be open. It is my job to make sure that this is a safe place for you to do that.
For sure.
It is your job to do it. Because intern or not, you have a unique set of skills that I did not have yesterday.
Wow, that's good.
You need to understand that. I tell every employee I've ever had that line or that set of words because it's so important, especially when you're starting your career, to understand that, yeah, you're starting your career, but you have value. Mm-hmm. You have an outlook that all of us jaded jackasses are not considering because you're not jaded yet.
Sure.
But before we go, the comment that I wanted to make in that is through all the neurodiversity, through all the diversity that we have, this industry is unique that from my observation in that we have the power to provide so much empathy and so much inclusivity that the people that join get to feel the thing that we all desire as a human, and that is acceptance for who we are.
Wow. That's great. That's a great way to end the podcast, actually.
Right? I should have cut it right there, but we do have an outro line.
Okay.
So again, Ray, thank you so much for coming on. Real quick, tell everybody how they can find you.
Yeah, so
you can podcast again.
You can find me on Twitter by going to RayRedacted.com. RayRedacted.com is my Twitter address, okay? Or you can do it at RayRedacted. TOH, that stands for Tribe of Hackers. TOHpodcast.com is where you can subscribe to the podcast and also find links to the books as well as the back episodes. And you can, if you are exceptionally rare, okay, I mean, I'm talking about 1 out of 50,000 people, you might even be able to write a review on it, because my statistics show that very few people are actually able to figure out how to write reviews, because I think I've got 3 reviews so far. How many do you have?
So we have star rankings, but we don't actually have written reviews.
Oh, I don't even have either one of them. I'll take either one of them, right? Good, bad, whatever that is. So that's tohpodcast.com. Obviously, Diana Initiative is dianainitiative.org. You guys know where to find Black Hat and DEF CON. Mentalhealthhackers.org, as well as also on Twitter. Be good to each other, please. And I hope to talk to you guys again soon.
And on that note, I think there were a lot of really good lessons in this show, and I think we do need to remember a couple things as we go out. 1, it's okay to not be okay. And 2, we just need to care about each other a little bit. So on that note, everybody, go forth and find badness.